This is The Micro Effect.
The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
There was a mighty nation, blessed above all of creation. It was a rare and precious pearl, conceived in faith and liberty, home of the brave, land of the free. It was the envy of the world. But this shining city on a hill has turned from the Creator's will and let evil take control. Now the reckless men who lead them want to strip away their freedom and to steal their very soul. Now it's smoke and mirrors, switching bait, criticize and confiscate and let the guilty walk away. In this once righteous, godly nation, in the halls of education, they forbid a child to pray. They say we need to spread the wealth. They pretend to guard the health of the feeble and the poor, while the hand they hold behind their back confuses and conceals the fact that the wolf is at the door. There's an unseen hand.
Well, welcome to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. It's a beautiful Tuesday morning. And we have on this show this morning a very special guest, someone who has been at the very center of the fight against UN Agenda 21 and UN Agenda 2030. And he is a prolific author. He's written a number of really first-class books. And the one that we're going to be talking about today is a new book that he just published. It's just in the process coming out right now. I believe it it came out in January, but it's a terrific read, and we will be talking about sustainable, what that word really means and what it means for America. So with that, I'll welcome our guest, Tom DeWeese. And Tom, you've been right at the center of this controversy for a very long time. You're one of the real original soldiers. You and Dr. Michael Kaufman and some of the other folks that have been in this for a very long time. And I think now you're probably the leader of the movement since Dr. Kaufman passed away last year. So with that, Tom, welcome to the show, and maybe give our listeners a little bit more of your background. And then we'll move into the discussion about your new book and what's been happening in America over the last several years since, I think the last time you were on was about a year ago. And we'll just talk about what is happening and what's happening with the Trump presidency and how that is improving the situation for Americans. So, Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dan. It's good to be with you. I am, the original people, as you mentioned, Dr. Michael Kaufman and Henry Lamb was the man who really went to the UN meetings and discovered Agenda 21, and he brought a bunch of us together and taught us what this was all about. It was a conference where, for 2 days, he pounded in our head all this stuff. And we were like on the floor saying, please, no more. I can't take any more. But we learned, and we went out and we created 10 national conferences, Freedom 21 conferences, to tell people about it. And we began to create kind of a cadre of activists who have really fought hard in local communities, city councils, county commissions, and so forth to, try to fight these policies. And after all these years, in the beginning, they've completely ignored us and paid no attention to us. Then they started to pay attention to us, and what they said Agenda 21 was was a comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society. They said it over and over and over again. I've got document after document where they said that, very proud of it, really moving on it. Then when we started to put a spotlight on it, suddenly their memories absolutely failed them, and they'd look at us with this look on their face and say, oh, you mean that 20-year-old, that innocuous 20-year-old document that doesn't have any enforcement capability? You know, that's what these guys do when you finally put a spotlight on them. But now we're starting, finally, after 20 years of fighting this, we're starting to get some elected officials to begin to understand what this is about. They're calling, saying, what can I do? And we're starting to make a little bit of headway because it's right in everybody's face.
Mm-hmm. Well, Tom, I have to applaud the hard work that you've put into this. And yes, I didn't mean to forget Henry Lamb, because really Henry was the guy that was at the very, very apex, at the very top of this whole fight against Agenda 21. And he's been gone for some years now, but people like you that are continuing that fight, it's absolutely essential that America wake up. And it's books and programs like you do that are awakening America.
Well, thank you. We put out the articles. I travel, I speak, we do these things, trying to help people understand. I understand how difficult it is for people to wrap their head around this, because it is so huge. Agenda 21, Sustainable Development Policies, literally affect every aspect of our lives. It's not just they sell it as an environmental program or just sensible development for the community, that sort of thing. But in reality, it encompasses every aspect of your life. It's right down to where you live, how you live, what kind of job you may have, how you get to that job, how many children you may have. It can get involved in that, the children's education system, all that. So when we talk about this and people want to fight and do something about it, and they start off in one direction, and all of a sudden something else comes up over here, and they're looking back and forth going, well, which direction do I take? What do I do? And lots of times they just give up because it seems so huge. What can we do about this? So I'll tell you, Dan, when I speak around the country, what I'm telling people is bring it down. Focus on one thing. And the fact of the matter is, if you can protect private property rights in your community, they cannot implement sustainable development policies. And so that's what I'm teaching people to focus on, is private property protection. And, that then the rest of it gets kind of bottled up, and they can't move forward.
Well, I think a lot of people fail to really understand that UN Agenda 21 is based on a communist model where collectivism takes over control of individualism and literally destroys individualism. And the collective is the powerful group that controls everything that's going to happen in our society. And I think a lot of people miss the point that this has been really the plan of communism for a very long time, is to just gradually insert themselves into the planning process, into all aspects of our life, until we get to the point where they're everywhere. They control everything, and they are literally very close to that point now. And I'm really pleased that America's finally starting to wake up. Do you see it that way too?
Yes, I do, and that energizes me. And I just see people, saying, okay, what do I do? It's funny because for several years, everything we were putting out was saying, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. Finally, a couple of 3 years ago, I started getting notes from people saying, okay, I get it. What do I do about it? And I jokingly said, gee, I don't know. I never got that far before. But we started to produce materials for activists. I am an activist, so I know what kind of things people need to have in their hands to be able to confidently move forward. And so I've tried very hard to bring these things together and provide them with that. and a focus on how to talk about it and how to go about it, because people get excited about something and they charge forward. I think one of the biggest problems we have with our movement is that we get a hold of somebody. They give you 3 minutes in front of city council, and or you grab a hold of somebody, to try to explain things to them, and in that 3 minutes, we try to tell them everything we know, and we start way up here that this is a UN thing, but this is where it all comes down to them saying, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory, because you've lost them after about 2 minutes because they don't know what you're talking about. They don't have the background you do, and I'm trying to teach people that we've got to bring it down a little bit, and let's start with the actual programs that they're implementing that you're having problems with, and then we can grow from there instead of the other way around. And that way, at least you have a chance to get somebody to listen to you, and then you can use building blocks to lead them to where we know this has all come from.
Well, and that's a really logical way to do it, because you're right. When you try to explain exactly what Agenda 21 is in 2 minutes or 3 minutes or less, boy, you are going to lose a lot of people.
Yeah. And
one of the
just
things
can't
that you've
grasp
been...
it.
I'm sorry, Tom?
I'm sorry, people just can't grasp it. They don't have the background of the international stuff and everything. They don't believe you. That's where it really comes down to.
Yeah, well, and our country has always suffered from a certain amount of cognitive dissonance, just because everything sounds so fantastic, because we've lived this lie that somehow our government is going to be always responsive to the people, and they're always going to be protecting our Constitution. And that just isn't the case anymore. Certainly not in the federal government, and more it's not that way at local level government too.
Yeah, that's a lot of other countries have experienced lots of upheaval over the years and over the centuries, and sometimes it's their way of life. They get used to it. We haven't had that here. We've had a fairly straightforward, calm life, and obviously there are exceptions to that, major exceptions. But basically, we've had a government that we could trust and didn't fear. That is changing, and people are beginning to fear government, and they don't know what to do about that. It's completely new, and one of the interesting things that you run into is the people who are implementing this. I call them the sustainabilists. They're very good at what they do. They use words that sound so innocent, sustainable, but they move their way into institutions that have been revered in our country for many, many years. I mean, the Chamber of Commerce, the YWCA, things like this. And when we start trying to point out how these institutions are helping to implement these programs, that's when we really lose them. They go, oh, come on. They don't believe that. But these guys, back in the 60s, when we had all the upheaval and the riots in the streets and all that going on, we had these very radical people. And all that ended in the early 70s, and people thought, well, those kids finally grew up and went out and got jobs, and that's all over. The truth of the matter is, they were dedicated communists, the ones who were leading those marches and those activities, and they knew exactly what they were doing, and they did spread out. They went into the news media, they went into the education system, they went into corporations, and now they're in these positions. And what do we have? We have an education system that has become a training system to create what I call global village idiots, to follow them without question. And we have a news media that follows everything and pitches it all. And we have corporations that are all pitching these policies now. And so that's where they went. They knew exactly what they were doing, and that's where they are.
Mm-hmm. You're 100% right on that. And, the sad part about it is that I know a lot of the people that are in these groups, and I'm not talking about the leadership, but I'm talking about people who are involved in local government or in different corporations and in different businesses and in education. And this system has been so totally, let's say, entrenched in our institutions that we are at a point now where many good people are doing things that are very, very bad for our country, and they just don't realize it. They're good people, and they think they're just being good citizens when, in fact, they're promoting ideas that are antithetical to our Constitution and to a republic.
Yeah, they've come through an education system of total indoctrination, and people want to help. They want to do good for other people. People don't want to see other people suffer, and they've been told over and over again, all these policies are bad. I mean, racist is the only word you hear anymore for everything. I want to have Jell-O for lunch. Well, that's racist, And they just have that pounded in their head over and over again. And the environmental movement has indoctrinated so many people about dirty air and dirty water, and well, of course nobody wants that, and so good dedicated people say, well, we're going to help with this. We've got to help with this, but they don't understand that the bottom line behind that, the attacks on private property primarily, which is my main focus. I've never met, for example, a farmer who wanted to give up his farm. And the people who are the best stewards of the land are the people who have to live off of it. Right. And yet these are the people that have been turned into enemies of the land, like the ranchers out in the West and so forth, to throw them off the land. And the government controlling that land usually turns into a wasteland. And, the Emerald Valley in California was created by farmers. And you take the farmers away from that, and you take away what they did, it becomes the desert that it is.
Right.
And I've watched this happen across the country, and we're turning the country into a wasteland by eliminating the people. And this is what sustainable development is. It is herding people off of rural lands and into the cities where they are much easier to be controlled, and and that land is locked away, and people are not allowed, to develop it and to be there.
Well, and if you see who the leaders of these environmental groups are, virtually none of them come from rural environment. They come from big cities, and they are told by a number of, let's say, the leading cadre that development is bad and that we're destroying our country and that rural America needs to be returned back to pre-Columbian wilderness and all these utopian things that are not realistic in any kind of a rural environment. And in reality, the people that are creating these programs are the people that don't understand the first thing about rural America.
I have joked many times, about if the environmentalists would just get out of their high-rises in New York City and actually touch the ground, they might know something about the environment. But I mean, it's a joke, but that's really true. And some of the things. Now, the book we were talking about that I wrote. The title is Sustainable, The War on Free Enterprise, Private Property, and Individuals. And some of the things I talk about in there, for example, conservation easements. And a lot of people think, this helps the farmer keep his farm. And so you have farmers signing up for these, and they're giving up development rights. They sell development rights. And, they get a little bit of tax money in their pocket or whatever, or tax breaks. But very quickly they find out that a land trust now is dictating to them what they can do on their property, if they can build other buildings on it, what kind of crops they can grow and how they're to be grown and so forth. Sustainable farming is putting more farmers out of business than any, any drought or anything else that would come up because it doesn't work. And now you've got farmers who have signed these conservation easements in perpetuity, forever. And yet the land trusts aren't tied to that. They trade these back and forth like commodities. The Nature Conservancy is one of the worst. That they get you into this thing and then they trade it off. It's a money-making thing for them, and
absolutely.
So that's but the poor farmer is stuck there forever, and he's lost his property rights. He's lost the value of his property, and eventually a lot of them have no choice, leave the farm. And what happens then? The land trust takes it over and turns it into wilderness, just like you described, back the way it was before Christopher Columbus came here. And this is a major tool they're using.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, one of the things I think a lot of people don't realize is that when they sign on to these conservation easements, that one of the things they agree to is that they will always abide by federal and state regulations on the environment. Well, these same groups like the Nature Conservancy have people embedded in these federal and state agencies, and they are constantly lobbying for more and more draconian and more restrictive regulations on farming and ranching. So when they sign on to this, they're signing on to a moving target that's moving in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. That's exact. I mean, they control the whole game, and so it's all a fixed ending. They know what the outcome is going to be. I want to share something with you because I found this. It was like this revelation that just came right in front of me, and ever since then I've been using it. When you go into your local community, your city council, county commission, their planning committees, you will hear them talking about, well, we've got to do these local plans. We've got to plan our community for the future because we can't have chaotic growth. That chaotic growth means we're going to damage the environment, we're going to have traffic jams, we're going to have all kind of problems, so we've got to get control of this. Sound familiar?
Oh, yeah.
Interestingly, I found this quote. The quote is, "The chaotic growth of cities will be replaced by a dynamic system of urban settlement. The region is formed by the economic interdependence of its development from the industrial complex to the industrial region. The region has a single system of transportation, a centralized administration, and a united system of education and research." Sound familiar?
Oh,
this
boy.
was written in 1968 by an architect named Alexei Gutenov. He was a Soviet-Russian architect writing in a book titled The Ideal Communist City, Sustainable Development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in fact, I think the Rockefeller Brothers Trust were the ones that actually put the money into the creation of the American Planning Association, and it was envisioned as being a system of planning that was based on a Soviet model.
Mm-hmm. And it definitely is.
Yeah, it is. Yes, it is.
That's what sustainable development is all about. I mean, first of all, how they started to sell this, as I said in the very beginning, as a comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society. I mean, that is an astounding statement. And it was used over and over again. Nancy Pelosi used it to introduce a resolution on Agenda 21 in 1992 into Congress. And I've got a 1994 American Planning Association newsletter. It was for the San Francisco area. And they had an article in there called "How Sustainable is Our Planning?" And one paragraph in there, it says, "Vice President Gore's book, Earth in the Balance, addressed many of the general issues of sustainability. Within the past year, the President's Council on Sustainable Development has been organized to develop recommendations for incorporating sustainability into the federal government. Also, various groups have been formed to implement Agenda 21, a comprehensive blueprint for sustainable development that was adopted at the recent Earth Summit." I mean, this one paragraph ties it all together. Al Gore, Earth in the Balance, Agenda 21, Sustainable Development, the American Planning Association. It's all right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And as you know, I'm a former county commissioner, and one of the things that came up time after time after time when I left office, we had fought off any kind of a countywide planning program, because I recognized exactly what Agenda 21 was doing there, but our planner was the Montana president of the American Planning Association, and since then she's been moving strongly toward trying to get countywide zoning and planning in place, and we just have to fight it tooth and nail. That's the only way we can do this, is just don't let it happen, and Americans need to understand that.
Yeah, and I fully believe that the way to fight it, as I said before, is on the local level. A lot of people, they get heavily involved in presidential campaigns and national, Congress and all that, say we're going to change everything to there. I believe if we're going to change it, we're going to change it from the bottom up rather than the top down. And so, as I say, if you can preserve private property rights and ownership and control of your own property in your local community, next thing you'll know, that'll move up. The state legislature will start to hear that message, and they will start to do some things that maybe will protect property rights. And if that starts to happen in several states, suddenly Congress will take notice of it. I mean, I think it's going to go that way rather than the other way around. It's too massive from the top. It has to happen in your own community.
Absolutely, and we need to recognize, in Montana, the training program for new commissioners, they had a pamphlet that was put out by Montana State University talking about a sustainable Montana. And in that packet, which was given to every one of the new commissioners as they were coming into the process, every one of those articles in there were written by one of the 3 ICLEI cities in Montana. Every article in there was about sustainable development, about planning, about how important it was to control everything. And that's the kind of stuff that we're teaching our county commissioners. So if they can do that in Montana, they're doing that all over the country.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a very important point. People wonder why they go to their city council meeting or county commission meeting and they're ignored. They get the minute they say the words Agenda 21 or they start to challenge the planning programs or whatever, they get the eye roll, they get the sigh, and they get dismissed. And people wonder, why is that? And the fact of the matter is, good people like yourself run for office. They want to do something in the community. And when they get in there, they are absolutely inundated with exactly what you're talking about, with these documents. What's the first thing we do when somebody gets elected to a new office, whether it's a mayor or city council, county commission, state rep? There are national organizations for each of those, National Conference of Mayors and so forth. And the first thing we do with our new elected officials is send them off to these meetings. And what are they hearing in those meetings? The people in the podium, the people talking to them, telling, here's the latest thing we've done, are these non-governmental organizations, these planning organizations that wrote this stuff in the first place, this is their agenda, eventually, and then of course when they're back home, they're given sample legislation and they're met at the door by these same representatives and they're saying, did you get this? Did you get that? We got it all ready here for you. Hey, we've got grant money for you. We've got all this. Eventually, these elected people who ran for office to be good people think, well, this is just the natural movement of government.
Tom, I can hear a commercial break coming on. I'm sorry to interrupt, but let's pick that up on the other side of the commercial break. And great discussion. Thank you.
This is The Micro Effect.
The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
It was 1776 when the founders signed the writ of independence from the Brits. It was revolution. Now an enemy from within would enslave us all again and deprive us of our rights in the Constitution. Restore the Republic. Wake up, it's time to understand.
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel, and my guest this morning is Tom DeWeese. And Tom, we've had a terrific discussion about UN Agenda 21 and his new book, Sustainable. Before we get into that discussion again, I want to remind our listeners that Debbie Boscalupi has her Radioactive Wednesday program coming on tomorrow morning at the same time slot that I'm in on Wednesday, and she has a gentleman coming on. They're going to be talking about how the original Green Movement was actually a Nazi movement, and it's pretty fascinating when you see how that all ties together with what the Green Movement is today. Also, I want to mention to our listeners that Jeff Bennett's got his Life, Liberty, and All That Jazz program on immediately after my program, and also on Wednesday. And I think that's Jeff does a terrific job with his program as well. I also want to mention the fundraising that we're doing now for the micro effect for our satellite uplink. And ask our listeners, please get in and support this program, because with that satellite uplink, we literally will be covering all of North America with this broadcast. So please get on board, buy our products from our sponsors, and get on and do what you can do to make sure that the word spreads around America. We need to get alternative media everywhere in every market that we can, and so we need to follow up with that. Also, I want to mention that my friends Chuck and Anita Untersea have a movie called A Revelation. There is being free broadcast throughout the United States from the 19th to the 28th, and I would suggest please go to my website, danhappel.com, and you will learn more. You can just click on that site and get a free preview of that. Well, it's not a preview, it's the whole movie, Revelation, and it's available until the 28th. And one last thing, I want to mention that our Red Pill Expo is coming up the 21st, 22nd, 23rd of June in Spokane, Washington, and Tom is going to be one of our speakers at that event, and we'll discuss that a little bit before the end of the program. But Tom will be talking about exactly the things that he's talking about on this program today. So, again, you can go to danhappel.com, and on that site you can sign up for the Red Pill Expo. You can sign up for the free movies. There's all sorts of information available there. Sorry, Tom, I had to do all these things to help pay the bills. But you were talking about how local government and how all these organizations are there to co-opt the individuals that get elected into these local positions. And you're absolutely right. I mean, they've got luncheons, they've got training programs, and it's all geared to get everybody on board with the sustainable development and the ultimate planning curriculum that they've got in mind.
Yeah, they're just absolutely inundated with these people, and of course they've got lots of money, they've got political power, and they've got all the goodies. And groups like American Planning Association, or ICLEI, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, which was one of the one of the groups that created Agenda 21 at the UN level, and they made it their mission to implement these policies worldwide. And at one point, over 600 American cities were paying dues to ICLEI, and for those dues, ICLEI was bringing in training programs, newsletters, conferences, all kinds of details and their mission was to train not just your county commissioners and so forth, but the staff at City Hall to always think in terms of sustainable on anything that they did. This, in other words, just completely transforming our government. Now, we started to put a big spotlight on ICLEI, and we managed to get more than 100 cities to stop paying them dues and not have them involved in the community anymore. And it's really funny because a friend of mine went to an international meeting and was talking to the head of ICLEI, and he just coyly said to him, "What do you think about all these groups that are attacking you?" And the guy looked at him and he says, "Oh my goodness, we are terrified of those people. We can't stop them. We can't get new communities to join with us." He immediately emailed me and told me that. So, we've had an impact in doing that. Not enough because they're still around, but and these guys are chameleons. Once you shine a bright light on them over here, they will emerge over here as something else. But the policy is always the same. But the bottom line is that your elected officials are the targets of all this. And so, again, they don't hear what I'm telling you now about these programs. They only hear these NGO groups. And so when somebody does go in and start talking about this, your elected officials are sitting there and going, "What?" And in their ear, the NGOs are saying, "Don't pay attention to the guy. This guy's a nut. Oh, these are fringe nuts. These are conspiracy theorists." And then you get shut off, and that's the end of the discussion. And this is what we're facing today.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. And I think people need to understand that. Like Maurice Strong, he was the Secretary General of the Earth Summit in 1992. He was a Marxist. One of his best friends was Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the communist leader of the Soviet Union before its so-called fall, and they are at the very center of the Green Movement. And, of course, Maurice Strong died here recently, or a year or so ago. I think there were a number of us that didn't mourn quite as much as some of the others. But I'll have one of his quotes here. It's clear that the current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class involving high meat intake, consumption of large amounts of frozen and convenience food, use of fossil fuels, ownership of motor vehicles and small electrical appliances, home and workplace air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable. These are the people that want to move us into the stack and pack, as Dr. Michael Kaufman used to refer to them, these big cities as human kennels. And the communist movement has been behind this since the very, very beginning.
Absolutely. And Maurice Strong also said, "Isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized nations collapse? Isn't it our duty to bring that about?" I mean, how much clearer can you be? And Mikhail Gorbachev, made the comment that the focus of the UN, the purpose of it really needs to lead towards global government. And when we bring these things out, we're quoting them. I'm not creative enough to make this stuff up, and I'm only quoting them. And the minute I do, I'm the conspiracy nut. But they said it,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And
that's why it's so important that you do such a good job of documenting everything, and you do. I do programs on Agenda 21 myself. I've got a PowerPoint program that I've done all over the country, and that's the way to do it. Use their quotes and show what they intend to do, and then leave it up to the audience to say, okay, is this what we really want? And very few people will say, yes, this is what we want.
Well, that's why I just issued an article, a challenge to the American Planning Association, because they come out with these surveys, and they have these questions in the surveys. Because we started attacking planning, they become absolutely paranoid about we've got to build support for planning. Well, how do we do that? And so they ask these questions. And one of these questions they asked in one of their surveys was, first of all, they made the statement that community planning is a process that seeks to engage all members of the community to create more prosperous and convenient, equitable, healthy, and attractive places for present and future generations. This is what we're trying to do for your community. And now, how many agree with that? And all hands go up. Well, yeah, I want a more prosperous, healthy, attractive community. And then they say, oh, you support planning. And then they put out these, survey results that 90% or 89% of the people support planning. Really?
Yeah.
It's like holding up a photograph of, a nice, shiny neighborhood and a ghetto and saying, which one do you want? I want the pretty one, please. Oh, you support planning. I issued a challenge just a few weeks ago to the American Planning Association, and I had 10 questions. What if you asked the questions this way? And one of the questions I had in here, how do the citizens feel about planning policy that forces them to move from their single-family homes with the garage for the cars and a backyard for the kids to play with the neighbor kids? Do they want to live in a high-rise where they have to take their kids down 12 flights of stairs and walk to the designated play park? Do they still support such planning? If they started to ask questions like this, what would the result be? People, begin to realize what this is about.
That's amazing. That's a really good idea. So I'm going to be real curious, and I'll stay in touch with you. I'd like to hear what their response will be, if there is a response.
Haven't had
They'll probably try to ignore it.
Yeah. What they did do back when we really started making some headway was first of all they put together boot camps for all their planners to come in to retrain them to how to talk about planning in the community. And then they put out with this what they called a glossary for the public. The opening line of this says, given the heightened scrutiny of planners by some members of the public, what is said or not said is especially important to building support for planning. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
and then
also known as propaganda.
Yeah, and then they go on to say, well, here's words, don't ever use these because this makes the critics see red. Don't use words like collaboration or consensus or density or organize and facilitate, public visioning, regionalism, smart growth, stakeholders, sustainability. Don't use those terms anymore. What we need to have instead is just a conversation with the community. Avoid talking about or linking plans and planning with regulatory matters. Don't ever say the words regulatory. Now, I ask you, what else is planning but regulatory?
Regulatory.
But don't say that.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're right. And, Tom, one of the things that comes out of all these moves to incorporate more and more planning into the process is the fact that with that planning, individual property rights are just being destroyed one after another. And that's something that's undeniable. If you look at what's happened over the last 40 years since planners have been such a big part of our economy and part of our society, individual property rights are really going down the tube in a hurry. It's
the number one target because, as I said earlier, you cannot implement sustainable policy if you've got property rights protection. Because you could stand there and say, no, I don't want that to happen to my property. This is my property. And what's happened here, and this is a major emphasis in my new book, is people have really forgotten what private property really means. They think it means now you pay the mortgage and you pay the taxes. And if you do that and you're a good little boy or girl, they'll leave you alone, and then you can live in peace on your property until they have a plan that they want to do with it. But, people don't realize that it used to be private property, no trespassing. This is mine. You cross that line, you're going to suffer the consequences for it. Oh, that is violent. That is vile. We can't have anything like that in our wonderful, loving, hugging society here. And so that has all been thrown out the window, and you pay the taxes and you pay the mortgage until we decide that we have some other use for it. One of the things in the book, I have a very intense chapter on the Kelo decision by the Supreme Court. And this was a decision that literally shocked everybody, that they came down with this decision. This neighborhood in Connecticut, where the Pfizer Corporation decided they wanted to build a compound, new factory, new whatever it was going to be in their community. And the community, the city planners and so forth, designated this neighborhood. This is where it's going to be. And they started using eminent domain. They used intimidation tactics to get these people out of this neighborhood and tear down their houses. One of the things they would do is they would put a bulldozer in front of one guy's house, and then he would put all kind of pressure on him until he gave up. And then he'd immediately bulldoze that house, and he'd move the bulldozer next door. Talk about intimidation. In America, this is what was happening. And Suzette Kelo had a house there. She didn't want to give it up. She took the case all the way to the Supreme Court, and everyone believed that the Supreme Court was certainly going to defend property rights. Every single word uttered by our founding fathers, our founding documents, our Supreme Court decisions throughout history had defended private property until this day. And the Supreme Court came down with a 5-1 decision saying that if a community can benefit by tearing down this neighborhood and building something else, and they're getting higher taxes for it or whatever the case may be, then that's okay. And what they did was destroy private property rights in this country, and they had to do that in order to implement sustainable development.
Yeah, you're right on. And one of the things that I think people fail to realize is that one of the reasons that our country is so clean, and we can have the freedom to discuss a lot of these things is because we've been successful. We've had a high regard for private property, and as a result, we have had a very, very successful country. We've created enormous amounts of wealth, and we've created the cleanest environment in the world. When you compare us to the developing and underdeveloped world, there's no comparison. And one of the reasons that we have that kind of a good environment is because we've got the money and the success that we can put a lot of those environmental, let's say, filters in place. And we couldn't do that if we didn't have profit in our culture. They're going to destroy that.
Yeah, and it's if you listen to the Sierra Club, we have spent probably $1 trillion on so-called environmental cleanup in this country, trying to make sure our rivers are pure and our air is pure and all that. If you listen to the Sierra Club, you think we haven't spent a dime. It's never enough, because the fact of the matter is it's not about that. That's the excuse. And,
right.
They get us to give up our liberties with the threat of environmental Armageddon. And yet, the more and more we do, it's never enough. And this really tells you what these people are all about. It's the excuse.
Yeah, well, it's a change in, as you said, and I'd love you to repeat that again. It is a refocusing and a change on the entire structure of our society and changing it into something that's totally different than what we have. And please do that quote again, because that is absolutely what this is all about.
The reorganization of human society, is that what you mean?
Yeah, that one.
Agenda 21 is a comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society. That's, good or bad, we're going to reorganize it. Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to mention as we're on that subject, the economist from Peru, Hernando de Soto, wrote a book why capital works in the West and nowhere else. And the premise that he makes is that the fact that we have private property in this country totally registered. We're down at the registrar's office down in the county, and we can prove that our land is ours. Then we can use it for equity. And 60% of the businesses in this country were started by people using the equity in their private property to fund it, and that employed more people than anybody else in the country. And he makes the case that the only real way to eradicate poverty anywhere is private property ownership. Where else does the average individual have the ability to have a substantial amount of wealth built, through that, and by private property? You don't get rich working a job. You get rich through investment. And private property, your home, is the number one way to do that. And why we have teeming poverty throughout the world is because private property is not allowed there. And, this is why the United States prospered as it did over ancient cultures. We moved forward because of private property. And today, that our country is getting poorer, and what's happening? Private property is being diminished.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Well, Tom, I want to make sure that we give you some time to talk about some of the books that you've written and some of the things you're doing around the country, and then maybe talk a little bit about your participation in the Red Pill Expo. Go ahead and tell our listeners some of the books and some of the ways they can sign up and get on your mailing list, and ways that they can follow the things that you're working on.
Sure, thank you. I've written 3 books. The first one was called Now Tell Me I Was Wrong, and it was a collection of articles that I wrote over about a 10-year period on all these subjects we're talking about, including personal privacy and, of course, Agenda 21 and property rights and education and all these kind of things. And as I wrote these, of course, I was told I was a nutcase, and then I started seeing editorials that read like I wrote them, and I said, now tell me I was wrong, that people were starting to figure it out. That was my first book. My second book came out a couple years ago called Erase, and this is the first time I ever wrote fiction, and it is a political thriller, a murder mystery set in an Agenda 21 world. And I've got 5 characters who are all trying to find the answers, and every time they get to the solution, they end up dead. And I've had a lot of people tell me that book has helped them understand what we're facing. It's much easier to understand it than policy books. So anyway, that is still available, and I may have a big announcement about that very shortly. Something new is going to happen with Erase. But my newest book is Sustainable, The War on Free Enterprise, Private Property, and Individuals. This is a culmination of everything I've ever worked on. And in this book, I talk about the lost definition of property rights. And the only solution, as I mentioned about Hernando de Soto, the only solution eradicating poverty, 10 points to define true property rights. I go into detail what sustainable development is. I talk about the Kelo decision. 10 questions to ask before signing a conservation easement, 10 reasons to avoid regional plans. And my favorite one, who takes the walk of shame when it comes to protecting private property rights? Got to read the book to figure that one out. And so these are available, all of them on my website, AmericanPolicy.org. You can order all of them there. We've got other documents and articles and archives there that we can, you can read all about this stuff. At the Red Pill Expo, what I'm going to really focus on is solutions. And we're working to put together a property rights network that will include activists, it'll include some local elected officials around the country, and I'm really working on our weakest link, which is the legal side of things. Every day we get calls from people saying, help me, help me, help me, and I don't have a solution for them other than political activism. And they need help, they need legal help, and I'm trying to reach out and find legal people who we can get involved in these fights, and they do exist. They are there. So this is what we're working on.
Yeah. Tom, I'll try to help you connect with some of those folks, and I want to thank you for being a guest on our program. I hear the commercial break coming up, but thank you again for being such a terrific guest, and hopefully we will see you in about 2 months at the Red Pill Expo, and we may have you on before then on one of the other networks if you are available at that time. So again, thank you, Tom, and thank you for being on this program, and we'll continue to work to connect the dots.
Thank you so much for listening to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. Dan will be back shortly. In the meantime, Dan wanted me to speak to you about connecting your own dots when it comes to being prepared for any situation. As we have all observed in the news, natural disasters are occurring at a record pace across the United States and the world. Hurricanes and floods, earthquakes, and wildfires burning out of control. You could potentially have a bullseye on your own town or country. For that reason, Dan has partnered with Patriot Prepared to bring you a full line of products to provide the insurance that you need for any unexpected disaster. Whether it's our full line of high-quality freeze-dried, storable food, our own industry-leading water filtration products, you can find it all by visiting patriotprepared.com/dots. It makes good sense to be prepared. That's patriotprepared.com/dots.
Squeaky clean sensation like none other with Vitamer toothpaste and mouthwash. Vitamer toothpaste and mouthwash is a unique natural formula not found in any other oral care products. With a gentle combination of zinc, folic acid, myrrh, and clove oil, Vitamer effectively whitens teeth, removes plaque, and freshens breath, and it does it naturally without any harmful chemicals. Visit us online at Vitamer.com. That's VITAMYR.com. Or call us today to place your order at 1-888-558-8482. That's 1-888-558-8482. Keep your teeth and gums healthy with Vitamer toothpaste and mouthwash. Vitamer, nature's answer to healthy teeth and gums. And remember, it's all completely natural. Available at participating health food stores nationwide.
Whew, nice shooting. Hey, that's a sweet AK-47 chest rig. Is that multicam?
Yep, got it from StrikeHardGear.com.
Strike what?
StrikeHardGear.com.
Set your sights on StrikeHardGear.com. Tough, tactical gear for your Soviet-style weapon that's made in the USA. Affordable, plus a no-questions-asked 30-day money-back guarantee and lifetime replacement warranty. StrikeHardGear.com. Go ahead, pull the trigger.
Olive's Auto Parts, 1135 Michigan Avenue in Orofino. Olive's Guns and Ammunitions, gunsmithing, accessories, scopes by Night Force, new and used. Olive's Chainsaws, sales and service. That's Olive's Auto Parts at 800-592-6832. That once again, 800-592-6832.
If you're 85 or younger, would you like peace of mind and comfort for your family? We're Final Expense Direct with an urgent message for you. The average funeral today costs over $8,000, but the most you'll get from government benefits is $255. How will your family pay the difference? We can help. Our senior plans start as low as just $1 a day and pay up to $30,000 for a funeral and other final expenses. Peace of mind is easy. There's no medical exam. You'll have lifetime coverage, and your plan can't be canceled as long as you pay your premiums. Call now for free information about our senior plans. Answer a few simple questions and receive approval right on the phone. Plus, call right now and we'll give you a discount prescription card for free. Call 800-558-9940. That's 800-558-9940. Again, 800-558-9940.
This is The Micro Effect.
The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
You take the blue pill, the The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
There was a mighty nation, blessed above all of creation. It was a rare and precious pearl, conceived in faith and liberty, home of the brave, land of the free. It was the envy of the world. But this shining city on a hill has turned from the Creator's will and let evil take control. Now the reckless men who lead them want to strip away their freedom and to steal their very soul. Now it's smoke and mirrors, switching bait, criticize and confiscate and let the guilty walk away. In this once righteous, godly nation, in the halls of education, they forbid a child to pray. They say we need to spread the wealth. They pretend to guard the health of the feeble and the poor, while the hand they hold behind their back confuses and conceals the fact that the wolf is at the door. There's an unseen hand.
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel, and I want to also talk about Radioactive Wednesday, Debbie Boscalupi's radio show that will be on tomorrow morning at the same time slot that we're on with Connecting the Dots, and she's going to help connect a few dots because she's got a gentleman on that program that's going to be talking about fascism and how Nazi Germany was the first green country in the world and how they used that environmentalism, radical environmentalism, to do a lot of programs that were very destructive. So that should be a terrific program. I want to remind our listeners, too, that Jeff Bennett has got Life, Liberty, and all that jazz that is on right after our programs. And I want to remind our listeners that they need to support the Micro Effect Radio Network because we right now are in the process of doing a fundraising to bring a satellite uplink into play with our network, and with that we will be literally covering all of North America, from Canada, from the tip of Canada to down to Mexico. And if we can do that, we can literally be reaching millions and millions of new listeners. So please help us get that in play and support us in any way you can through our sponsors, through some of the products that we're showing on our website, and just outright donations. I also ask our listeners to come and look at my new website. I've just completely rebuilt that website. It's danhappel.com, and on that there is information on signing up for the Red Pill Expo, also a free movie known as Revelation that will be available for free viewing from the 19th through the 28th. So we still got a few days being able to watch that free movie, and that was a terrific movie that Chuck and Anita Untersea have produced. So please go to that site and check on that information as well. My guest on this hour is a friend, a gentleman who is a national security advisor. He's worked with Congress as a liaison. He has a company called Security Solutions Technology, and that gentleman's name is Bruce J. Moran. And Bruce, welcome to the show. Today we're going to be talking about the Syria situation, and we're also going to talk a little bit about the deep state with the Trump presidency. So anyway, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Dan. God bless you. God bless us all. God bless our America. When we're looking at Syria, it's a very important point that President Trump had made about Syria, and that we need to understand our national security interests there and what we've done so far and what needs to be done thereafter. It's not only the strike that was important in him sending the message to Russia and Syria, but it was his message to President Kim in Korea that we mean business. And the business we're talking about is the United States taking a new stance of not being the policeman to the world, but showing people that we have the capacity to help humanitarian efforts around the world as well. And what does this mean? Well, when we got into Iraq after the pullout and ISIS took over, then we came in and cleaned it up. That was a terrific job of President Trump being General Mattis. And we saw a movement that when President Trump says something, he does it, and he takes care of business. Now in Syria, as you saw this latest strike, we're now thinking about getting out. I agree with him 100%, 110% on that one, because we've been there, we've done our share. Now it's time for other countries in the European Union and the Arab nation to start taking control of that part of Syria where we are stationed with our troops. There are about 2,000 of us there. We are, very effective at what we do. We took care of ISIS in Iraq. There's still some remnants running around there. There's also Nusra Front, which is Al-Qaeda, still there in the north of Syria. It's called HT now. There's several factions that joined Al-Qaeda. So I think what President Trump is saying is we've done our share, now let other countries take care of their business. Now what we're talking about here is the chemical weapons, and that was the reason why we went into Syria in the first place. And chemical weapons can be as many as 70 different kinds of compounds. And as you know, it's an atrocity once they're used. It causes devastation everywhere. Syria itself signed a treaty back in 2013. So if they went about signing the treaty and they still had chemical weapons, we must ask ourselves this question. What the heck happened in the meantime? How do they reconstitute the weapons? What are they doing with the weapons now? And what is Russia doing as its shepherd to make sure they don't have them? Russia signed on at that time to oversee the destruction of chemical weapons in Syria, and they did. But we don't know how much, to what capacity they were destroyed. They could have destroyed 80%. But if you think of reconstitution itself of a chemical weapon, it doesn't take that long. Maybe 2 to 3 scientists in 6 months could start the whole program back up and running. And they can have it in maybe 30, 40 parts of the country. So what we did destroy is, the major parts of their chemical weapons, I would say their compound and where they make it, manufacturing. But where we're at right now is how are we looking at it with the United States, United Kingdom and France. As you know, President Macron is here and they're having their first dinner, a White House dinner, and they're probably discussing part of this strategy as we're talking about it on the radio.
Mm-hmm. Well, Bruce, one of the things that I want you to kind of tell our listeners, too, I've had a number of people say, well, we don't even know who is responsible for these chemical weapons. Is it, in fact, Assad, or is it some like ISIS or one of the other groups that is using these chemical weapons? And so you please tell our listeners exactly how this has been determined and targeted, and how we know how and where and when these weapons have been used.
Well, it's been ongoing since they signed that treaty back in 2013 that chemical weapons have been used in Syria. and we needed to send a strong and clear message, and this was the United Kingdom, France, and the United States saying this is uncalled for, and what does this mean when they still exist and they've been used and dispersed. Back in 2013, 2014, there was a couple truckloads of it that went to Nusra Front that subsequently became HT. So, we're not talking about rebels, we're talking about Al-Qaeda had some, possible use up in the north there, and then, as you know, ISIS has no scruples of using these kind of things. But
right.
For all intents and purposes, ISIS is no longer operational in Raqqa anymore. That's the capital of Syria, where they were at. That was their capital for ISIS, and in Mosul in Iraq. So we're talking about just the general use of chemical weapons, which is an atrocity. So that was the message that was sent.
Got it. Okay.
And
no, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Oh, you can go on, because you have.
Well,
outline.
what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about a statement you made at the very beginning of this, and that is that President Trump has been extremely forthright and has said exactly what he wants to do, and he's been following a program that has been very straightforward, and quite frankly, it's really the opposite of what the globalists and what the New World Order want him to follow. He's doing that same program in Iraq, or in North Korea, and for that matter, even in China, where he's talking about, creating additional tariffs if he wants fair trade, not free trade. He wants it to be fair, and every time he does something like this, all the naysayers come out of the woodwork and they scream and rant and, oh, he's going to ruin the world, he's going to destroy everything. And in fact, he's been incredibly successful in that tactical position that he's followed.
That is correct. Some people call it the deep state, others call it the establishment, others call it Agenda 21. But what we're seeing is a great push against him. Any which way he moves personally, they're going after his family. They're coming after him personally, as you can see on just recently in the last 3 weeks. They're coming after the Republican Party. They're suing each other. Frivolous lawsuits. They're having different ways of trying to restructure the Russian situation. So what I wanted to talk about, and that's such a disgraceful way of treating the President of the United States. Mm-hmm. But they don't find any other recourse because they're all tied up in all their deals that go back for 20 years, and these are billions and billions of dollars that are part of what they do. And once you start dismantling their trigger points, how this all comes back to them, they're going to be pushing it back as hard as they can from every which way. Mm-hmm. And I think you understand that. It happens to all of us because we're all part of the same. He didn't get all his judges appointed. He didn't get his people appointed to office. He's having problems with Pompeo. They're pushing back any which way. And there is Pompeo. Mike Pompeo's a great guy. And he went over to Korea, over Easter, North Korea, and he's talking to Kim. It's never been done before. He's opening up a new door. It's a new negotiation for denuclearization, and that's what we're talking about. They would never even touch that. They'd like to keep that going in play because there's more to be done in terms of how they want their effects on the global economy. That's what you're saying, I think.
Right. Oh, yeah, exactly. And the North Korea is a perfect example under really the previous administrations, and I'll use those in plural. The only way that they ever dealt with Kim was to give him money and to acquiesce to all the different things and allow him a lot of latitude and literally give him the money that he could build a huge nuclear program. well, I won't say it was huge, but certainly a nuclear program. And this president is approaching it in a totally different way, and he's approaching it in a way that maybe we should have been following for the last 50 or 60 years.
I concur. And how has he demonstrated it? Well, if you look at Moab in Afghanistan, that's the mother of all bombs. That's awfully scary, because he went in there and dropped the bomb and went in through all the tunnels in that whole area there. Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at North Korea, where they have their missiles based in all the caverns and tunnels in North Korea, you drop 2 of those there and it wipes out all their missile defense. Kim saw that. He realized that. But it wasn't only the Moab, it was the second strike. It was 3 countries coming together who were, permanent members on the UN Security Council to tell Russia, you got to get your act together. And since Russia is shepherding Syria and we're still concerned about chemical weapons, let's take care of that. But what I found as a problem was the UN weapons inspectors. They weren't there right away. Why weren't UN inspectors there when it happened? Why weren't they permanently in? There's only one country we know that had in that area. I'm not just talking about, Assad. I'm talking about in that whole area where chemical weapons were being used in the world. Mm-hmm. Why wasn't a permanent UN inspector there or inspectors there to watch over Assad and then watch over the area if any of this stuff went down? It wasn't done. Mm-hmm. You think you go to the Hague,
also is a pretty good indication of how effective the UN is and say, why we shouldn't be supporting it all that much.
No, it seems like a no-brainer that the Hague should have had somebody over there permanently to watch what was going on. That's what my point is. The Russians are arguing that they came in after them, but the weapons inspectors are saying we got shot at. But if you look at the area, where we're talking about, where the weapons inspectors were, it's only 15 minutes away where the chemical weapons were used. It's not. It's a Damascus suburb. That's what's ridiculous about that. If you have a permanent weapons inspector from The Hague in Damascus watching over the reconstitution of chemical weapons that could be done, and he can report it back to The Hague, or anything that's used on the ground, he can go immediately there with a preliminary report, then bring more weapons inspectors there later. They were there 10 days after. The Russians went in, I think, 3 and 4 days later. If the Russians went in 3 and 4 days after the chemical weapons attack on April 7th, and they said, how come my inspector wasn't with them at the time, a UN inspector? You need a partial, third party. This is common sense.
Sure, absolutely. Well, tell us how you see the Russians and the American working together, or do you see them working together to find a solution to this problem?
I think you can probably have a new UN resolution where the Russians stand at the table, and China will be there, and France, and the United Kingdom, and us. And you need to have the countries who are, the permanent members figure out something that needs to be done there. We've taken up the lion's share of the work, as you know, in that part of the world, in Syria and Iraq. So it's time for Russia to step up, and then the Arab countries to step up. Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, put some troops on the ground there. We only have 2,000 troops there, and they're doing one heck of a terrific job. But why not have somebody else there? Let them maybe support a safe zone. Let them take on certain responsibilities for transparency, responsibility, accountability for chemical weapons. Why is it always the United States?
Well, and that's a great point, Bruce. Is that I think an awful lot of us, and I know you're one that agree with this. We need to extract ourselves from being the policemen of the world, and in some of these other countries, that have a more direct benefit or loss from something happening near their borders or on their borders, they need to be the ones that step up and let's take some of that responsibility away from the United States and allow us to go back to more of a defensive role than we've had in the past.
Yeah, we can always be a supportive role anywhere in the world. We have so many bases, it's not a problem. We're always going to be helping in humanitarian efforts around the world. When there's a tsunami or, a hurricane coming through, we're there. We're helping everybody out. But that's not the point. We are always going to be around, but militarily and, shooting missiles, cruise missiles, and that, let's try to be more reasonable and trying to be using more rationale in how other countries can step up to the plate when and where it's needed. Now, Syria is a point, because if you look at it's about 6 million refugees that went from there. Jordan took a lot onto themselves, and Turkey did, in the south there. But also Europe was flooded with them. And Europe was also flooded with what? ISIS, infiltrators. They were making up passports in Raqqa. Do you think they would have an interest in securing Syria with all the insurgents that are there, all the jihadists that are there, all the Muslim extremists that are running around in their countries? I think so. I'm
think
raising
you're
my
right.
voice. I'm trying to.
Okay,
I have some issues with this because there's the Christian genocide that was going on in Iraq, of course in Syria, and nothing was really done. And our team is working on that part of it too. So it's real sad, and it's a real travesty. So there was a lot of people there that were crucified and roasted alive. Their kids, the girls were sold as sex slaves. So that's the other part that's not being addressed. When these things happen, these atrocities, these things are part and parcel of what goes down. It's chemical weapons, but there are other atrocities that happen at the same time. And all these people were leaving Syria, including the Syrians that are, the Christians, the Chaldeans, and, the different factions of, that's where Christ, initially established the church with his apostles, was in the Nivea Plain in northern Iraq there. And if we see these kind of travesties happening, these human rights violations, this genocide, and it happened to a lot of different groups, the Yazidis, and you saw the rescue of the helicopters, we came in, to pull them out. They were trapped on a mountain there. That's ridiculous. That's disgusting. If people don't understand, President Trump understands this, and he says, let's stop this now, and let's get out of there, let other countries take the responsibility, that's the most logical and rational way to think about it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and Bruce, your comments about the Christian cultures in the Middle East, when Assad and if we go back and look at the protection of the Christians, that hasn't been happening recently since we've had all these radical groups in the area. And for some reason, we don't provide let's say, an escape route for these people, yet we'll leave our borders open for virtually anybody, from any country. And at the same time, we're not providing any kind of protection for the Christian communities that are over in the Middle East.
That's what President Trump did.
To me.
He found out that the money going to the UN wasn't used correctly how he thought it would be, and he assigned USAID, which is a part of the Department of State, to have those monies. And now they're going to be distributed to the minorities in the northern part of Iraq, in the Nivea Plain region. That's what you do. If you see other people aren't getting the job done, I'm not saying the UN isn't working there and they're not doing things, one thing the UN did was, which was really correct, was reconciliation efforts. But it wasn't with the minorities. It was with the Shia and the Sunnis. But they're two Muslim factions. You definitely have to work with everybody, especially in northern Iraq there, where there's a larger constitution of minority groups who have different religions. It's just not, a Muslim country. It's a different country up north there in Iraq. People need to realize that part too. That's why President Trump, like I said, relocated the money that was going to the UN for Iraq to U.S. aid, which is directly from the U.S., and it goes directly to the people on the ground in Iraq to support their efforts.
Well,
so,
I think that's...
I know people understood that. I mean, that's a great move. That's ingenious. He understood that, and he acted on it, right away. The people recognize President Trump for seeing a lot of things that aren't appearing in the news and showing the American public that he's really on top of these things.
Right. Bruce, we got a commercial break. I can hear the music, but hold that thought, and we'll pick it up on the other side of the break.
Okay.
This is The Micro Effect.
The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
You don't really understand sometimes what a terrible burden it is to know some of the things that I know. And try to wake people up and impart this knowledge to them. And find out that they just have walls built in front of them. They want to be slaves.
Now, I risk sounding like a conspiracy theorist, but it's no longer a theory. What I'm about to say is fact. The secret organizations of the world power elite are no longer secret. They have planned and are now leading us into a one-world communist government.
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel, and this hour my guest is Bruce Moran, and Bruce, we were talking about the proper role of the UN and what our president has been doing, what President Trump has been doing to make them more accountable. And I'm no fan of the UN. As a matter of fact, I'd just as soon see that agency completely dissolved because it's got so many communist roots to it. But I think what you're saying is that if they're going to be in the position of power, then they need to be accountable and need to be doing the things that they are supposedly mandated to do from the very beginning. And President Trump, I think, is trying to make that happen, and hopefully we're starting to see some of the results of his policies starting to take fruit. Tell our listeners, from your perspective, you've been involved with national security literally for most of your life, and you really understand how this process has been working. Tell us what you think of this president and what you think of the policies that he's been trying to implement from let's say, a constitutional perspective.
Well, let's take a look at something very simple. First, constitutionally, is border security. And if you look at where we go back to, say, the end of World War I, and we had Teddy Roosevelt there, he was very much straightforward, too, to the American public. And America back then was basically what we were trying to defend right now. President Trump is saying, make America great again. America was great at that time. What has happened in between? The Constitution has been basically thrown aside, and a lot of different things have happened. Where are our citizens' rights being protected on the southern border when immigrants or illegal aliens are given a lot of rights and federal, welfare programs to support them? Where are the U.S. citizens? That's the Constitution of individual sovereignty. individual liberty, individual freedom, that you're a citizen of the United States. You paid into these programs, and your checks were taking, tax dollars out of it to support this. These people who are coming here are coming in under the guise of another multicultural, politically correct program. It has nothing to do with U.S. citizens. If they want to be a U.S. citizen, then, apply for it like everybody else does and get in line. Mm-hmm. I have friends and their families that have done that, and that's, proper and fitting. There are a lot of the programs that should have never gone into effect. That would be catch and release. Well, they catch them on the border, and they release them. Well, where do they go? You think they'd go back into Mexico? No, they come into the United States, and they're given a year to report in after they're caught. Do they report in? No. Does that follow the U.S. Constitution of being a citizen and following the rule of law? No. Do they disappear? Yes. Where do they go? We don't know. That's just a real basic understanding.
Yeah,
now, the other thing we can talk about are individual rights as a citizen, where we had the refugees coming into the country from Islamic, states where ISIS was in control or the jihad was in full force. How do you protect the United States citizen? How do you protect our individual rights so we don't have to be fearful in our own country? President Trump executed, a ban on several countries. And then he got fought tooth and nail by other people who didn't want that to be in effect. To me, President Trump is looking at everything in a practical and actually just manner for everybody. We don't mind people coming to our country. We don't mind people being part of the system. But if you don't assimilate and you want to cause a lot of havoc and mayhem and kill people and be a terrorist, we don't want that here. That's not the way our country was built. That's not the way we live. And we're being open and honest and having everybody come in here. But if you're going to game the system and do what you want to do and become a terrorist, then you're not welcome here. And that's what President Trump is saying. You're not welcome here. It's not, anybody's not welcome here. It's just that kind of thinking, that kind of jihad mentality, that kind of terrorism is not acceptable. We have free and open schools. We have free and open spaces all around the country. You go to the marketplaces, you go to your movie theaters, you go to the stadiums where you have sporting events. This is a different way a country is run. This is what happened since the beginning with the revolution of our founding fathers. Unless you're talking about the Constitution, and our Bill of Rights being founded at the early parts of the history of our country. He's protecting us. He's protecting what we stand for. He's making America great again, as he says it, in the true sense of the word, because we've lost our fight. We lost our capabilities through people in different parts of government. It's not just the federal government. It's in the state governments and it's in the municipal governments that are supporting these kind of efforts. And it's not the right thing to do for every American citizen. And I'm talking about every American citizen, whoever you may be. It's not a prejudicial or a racial thing. Everybody needs to be protected. Everybody needs to be equally under the law, under the rule of law. Their rights protected and justice prevails. And Jeff Sessions is demonstrating that right now. So, there's a lot to be done. He's trying to do it. He's getting a lot of pushback. Like I said, there's at least 150 judges and maybe 500 appointees that need to go through. This should have been done, probably 3-4 months ago, where most of this is, taken care of. But there's, it's not only Democrats, but the Republicans have to restructure the appointment process because it's now 30 days. That's a long time, to have a person wait, to get approved. And just move it up. Now, Mitch can do that. Mitch is a great guy. His wife's running one of the, U.S. departments and agencies. So let's get this stuff done. This is not a, or you can use the nuclear effect, which is, just come in and say we're going to approve this person. But that's not the right way to do it because you want everybody to participate. But since the pushback is so bad And look what they did to Pompeo. He should have been through the first time, So,
Yeah.
And Mike Pompeo's a good guy to be, Secretary of State.
Right, and one of the things,
Am I covering
Bruce,
it in the right
you
way?
and I have
Do you
talked
think
about
people
this in the
understand it?
past, but one of the things that comes with this push for globalism and the so-called New World Order is a dissolution of borders and reducing national sovereignty to the point where it's meaningless. And that's one of the reasons I believe that we've had so many of our political leaders who have ignored our borders and have done all these policies that literally dissolve the border. Is part of the New World Order is no borders.
I agree. I thought I was saying that, but that's another way of looking at it and saying it the same way. I think so, too. Yeah. I think the borderless countries is not a good idea because you have to have economic freedom sustained. This will be something we will talk about on the business side of it. And economic freedom is about everybody being able to get a job, everybody contributing their fair taxes, everybody going to school. That comes from a border where you know who's going to contribute, who is not, and who's going to be participating as a citizen in your country to make it a better place to be. That's what our founding fathers are about. They broke away from England because they wanted to run the country, move away from colonial control.
And they wanted a national identity.
Different than colonial control, that's.
Well, that's right, Bruce. And they wanted a national identity, and part of our national identity is all the things that come from our Constitution. And most of these people that are streaming into our country, not only are they not becoming part of our society, in many ways they resist being part of our society, and they want to bring their old traditional society with them, and they're not really assimilating the way previous generations of, let's say, immigrants coming into the country assimilated.
That's because of the multiculturalism, I would say, philosophy that's being pushed. And you find nothing wrong with that. But if people don't know how to speak English and they can't get a job, then where does that leave them? I'm looking from a real basic, fundamental point of view. How do the kids go to school if they're not assimilating?
Mm-hmm. Well, not speaking the same language, speaking all these different languages, that's not part of assimilation for sure.
Yeah, and maybe I don't see, second languages as being a problem being taught in schools, but English should probably be the first one because that's the English language, and that's basically the business language around the world. And if you want to be part of a larger American vision and you speak English, that'll help you move up the ladder much more quickly. I'm not saying anything prejudicial here. I'm saying that's the way this country is built on the English language. And if you have the ability to speak English, you'll be able to get a job and work your way up the ladder that way. My grandmother didn't speak English very well, but we took care of her, And she was from the old country, but that was my uncles. And they all spoke English. They grew up here, and some of them, were born over in the old country. But what we did was, as we came here, we didn't think we were not Americans. You see what I mean? They still think their culture dominates who they are. We thought our culture was very important to us individually, and we kept it to our hearts. But we also thought America was the land of plenty, the vision to grow up and do better things, to work with everybody else around you. That's a different vision than people coming in from countries who are refugees, who maybe don't speak English at all, who haven't held a job, and who are suffering. So what do you do? That's the question,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I know that certainly President Trump is trying to solve some of those border issues. One of your associates that you work with a great deal, Chuck Floyd, was on one of my radio shows with General Paul Vallely, and we were talking about the southern border and how what a mess we've got down there now.
That's right.
And I know that President Trump is trying to deal with that because he realizes it's not just the migrant people coming in and so forth. It's child trafficking. It's a huge drug cartel issue with bringing drugs into the country. It's dealing with a whole series, terrorism, a whole series of issues that you cannot deal with unless you have a secure border and unless you can control the number of immigrants that come into your country legally. And I know that we're a country of immigrants, but we also we're a country of legal immigrants. And it's important that we secure the border so that we can control the kind of people that come into the country. And I don't mean that in any kind of a racial way. I mean that in a way of drugs and child trafficking and all these other illegal activities that are part of illegal immigration.
Right, MS-13's coming across the border. They get thrown out and they come back in. We know exactly what you're saying. You didn't even mention the problem with women coming across the border from the Honduras, Guatemala, and there's one more country. 80% of the women, 75 to 85% of the women are raped.
Yeah.
Well, the trauma, maybe the pregnancies, of the inhumane acts perpetuated on these women who are traveling through Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
It's unheard of. Oh, it's El Salvador was the other country. El Salvador, Honduras, and
Guatemala, Nicaragua. Mm-hmm.
No, not Nicaragua. It's Guatemala. It's so sick, I've talked about this for a year, and I look at the women's movement in the United States, and they're talking about having parts of their bodies touched and, being discriminated in the job market. This is pale in comparison.
Oh, yeah.
And how come they're not taking this cause up with these women who have to leave their country in El Salvador, in Honduras, How come they're not taking it up in Guatemala? How come we can't always be the rescuers? We've been dealing with that. And how come Mexico isn't stepping up? They're allowing them to come through the country and travel all the way through the country, go all the way up north. They call it El Norte.
Mm-hmm.
What responsibility does the Mexican government have?
Right.
And some of these women coming across are used as, trafficking as prostitutes once they get here. They don't have any choice. They're told they're coming here and they're going to find a husband, and then all of a sudden they end up in a house of ill repute.
Well, I've seen documents, Bruce, that say that Mexico really is showing signs right now of being a failed state. They are losing control of their own government because the drug cartels and all these illegal activities that are going on in the country have literally taken over the government.
Yeah, they had closed down the State Department issued a warning to go to Cancun now. They had some tragedies over there with deaths and stuff. So that was played a card. I've been there twice, and you go over there and you say, oh, this is fantastic. All of a sudden, cartels are there, and well, it's not so fantastic anymore.
Mm-hmm.
When we were growing up, Acapulco used to be the place to go. Cartel runs Acapulco now.
Mm-hmm.
So you still have Puerto Vallarta, and there's other places to go. But Mexico. There was the Australian police from Australia. They recently, I think within the last week, went to Guadalajara because they wanted to stop the drug trafficking going to Australia from the Guadalajara cartel.
Mm.
So Australia sends their police there to help out. They have that big methamphetamine, problem. So, this Molly and, the kids are taking it at the, we need, we're having an opium effect here. So, the opiates is another thing that you didn't discuss, and that was the major problem, for us closing down the borders to stop that, because it's impacting our high schools. Kids are overdosing in our high schools now.
Right.
All over the states, I had a friend, was one of his cousins saying, I've heard of like 3 of them that friends of friends already within the last 3 months. It's becoming an epidemic, and it's getting ugly. And how ugly does it have to get? And how bad does it have to get if people aren't understanding that? That's what President Trump is saying, too. What's the matter? That we're trying to use common sense and logic and good rationale to really protect all our citizens and stop the insane drug epidemic we have here.
Mm-hmm. Well, we had Ann Blake Tracy on our show a few weeks ago, and we were talking about how the doping of the American school system, how so many of these young people, when they do have gun violence and things in the schools, almost always you can associate them with some kind of a drug issue that is part of what causes that problem in the first place.
Yeah, I think it's 70% of the people in federal penitentiaries, there's some kind of drug-related issue there. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, wow. Well, Bruce, I want you've worked really closely with the Trump administration. You work with Congress. How do you see the relationship between President Trump and Congress? How do you see? There's a tremendous push by the deep state, and that includes, I hate to say it, but way, way too many of our elected officials. How do you see the relationship between Trump and the deep state? Is he winning the battle? From my perspective, it looks like he's winning a lot of battles that I wouldn't have believed he could.
I agree. He's not getting recognition for the major programs he's put through. Look at the stock market. They said it was going to tank when he got elected.
Yeah.
It just went straight up. He institutes some programs, and then they say, oh, it's not good, and all that. Then it filters out within a week. The stock market continues to rise, so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's pushback in the media and, in certain parts of because everybody gets to speak their mind on TV here that are part of the business. They're saying this is not good, that's not good, this is good. Then when they're saying that, then all of it becomes what? Factored into the market, and the economy still what? Continues to rise. I think this last month the GDP went to 2% or 2.5%. It was running around 3%. So it was just 1 month. It took a little bubble, hiccup. But the economy, is not going to always be consistent, running at 3. But if it runs at 3, that's far surpasses what's been done in the past. I'm talking about 3% GDP. So that's another part of our national security problem is creating jobs, sustaining the jobs, then having the market grow. I'm not talking about the stock market. I'm talking about the job market. And that's for the small and intermediate businesses and all the startup businesses that come before that. That has to be sustained. That has to be established. That's what makes America great. And that's how President Trump is starting to address these issues. Not everything can be done at once, but certainly, to have that large tax relief and then to move forward on, his promises and see if Congress is going to move. Think of it as a big battleship. And he came in to take command of it, and they created a lot of tsunamis and undercurrent waves, and that ship was being rocked and pulled, and but it's staying afloat. And now, when the guns are upon them, and this is a battleship, remember, so if you saw what happened in Syria, and you saw the first strike, now the second strike is even more powerful. Now the guns are pointing on them because it's midterm election. What are they going to do? Are they going to support the president? Are they going to abide by what is right for the country, how this country's been designed through the Constitution? That's the question.
Yeah. Well, and do you see a strengthening of his position where Congress is working a little bit more effectively with him, or do you still see that level of resistance that
they have to
that
get
we
the
saw
appointees
early?
in there so the executive branch could do its job, so his programs and policies can be instituted.
Right.
He's missing about 500. That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Once they get people in there, he is the president of the executive branch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's the Department of Commerce, that's House and Urban Development, that's CIA, that's DOD, that's Department of Homeland Security. You got to get your people in there. There's a Department of Agriculture. That's where you come in, right? You want to make sure ag is good across the country. In Montana, where you're at, Arizona, California, all those farmers and ranchers need to be protected.
Absolutely. Well, Bruce, it sounds like we're moving into the top of the hour. I want to thank you for being our guest again and for talking about these important subjects. And as always, I really enjoyed the conversation and hope you'll come back on at a later date, and we'll do this again.
God bless you, and God bless our America.
Thank you.